Hey YouTube, I believe it's June 23rd, 2021. It's a Thursday, if that helps. Welcome to the Bubba Continuum. And of course, my name is not Bubba, but I bring that on myself by not saying what my actual name is. I just wanted to do a video catching up on my life. I haven't been around for a while. I did a video the other day and I didn't feel like putting it up. I thought I could do better. So where have I been? Egypt. I've been to Egypt. And why have I been to Egypt? Well, I think I told about this in my last video. I had this extraordinary experience with online dating. Um, I hate to use the term online dating. Maybe I've said that before. I think grown-ups don't date. Grown-ups pursue marriage. You know, dating is something you do when you just want people to sleep with. So anyway, they call the sites dating sites. So I will say I had an online dating experience. I told about this before. I had this friend who nagged me all the time, and he said, you know, you have to find somebody, you have to do something with your life, get out there and start looking and be like me and go on an online dating site. He had this big stable of women. He'd been doing it for years, and he invested a lot of money and went on a lot of dates. He met a lot of women who were very attractive, you know, while encouraging me to date unattractive women, which is something he finally admitted to. But anyway, he found a lot of women who were very attractive physically, but yet who did not work out too well otherwise. So I went on this site, and there were two things different about this site than other sites I had tried like the previous month. First of all, the site I went to, I decided to go to an interracial dating site because I had met a lot of black women that I really liked. Even when I was a kid, I had this feeling that I should be with a black woman, that God was going to put me with a black woman someday. So I thought I would open myself up to that and see what happened. And the second thing was I opened myself up to women from other countries. And I think this was a good choice because within a week or so, not only had I met a phenomenal woman from Zambia who was very good looking and younger than I am, and a wonderful Christian, knows the Bible up one side, down the other, loves prayer, you know, just phenomenal woman. Not only had I met her, but within a very short time, I was already thinking, this is somebody I would like to marry. I mean, unless something goes wrong. So my friend is mad at me about that because he's still looking around, and you know, I just jumped in and had beginner's luck. I shouldn't call it luck because obviously it came from God. You know, you have to have God on your side if you want to marry someone who will work out. There's no way to rely on your own judgment safely when it comes to marriage. When sex is involved and attraction, and you know, for women, the desire for security and so forth, you're going to make stupid decisions. It's going to warp your judgment, and you're going to believe what you want to believe instead of what's really true. And the other person there's a good chance they'll lie to you. You know, women have a tendency to try to be everything you want them to be until the ring comes on, and then bang, they're fat and they don't like sex anymore. So you need God on your side, and this match obviously came from God. Anyway, she lives in Zambia, of all places, and we spent all this time today, not today, every day, video chatting and so forth. She wanted a video chat. It was her idea because she wanted to make sure I wasn't scamming her, which is kind of funny considering Africa is the scamming capital of the world, especially for online dating. But anyway, we spent a lot of time video chatting and so forth, but that's not really satisfactory. You want to be in the same room with the other person eventually. And also, in order to marry someone, a foreigner, if you're in the United States, you have to, there's two ways to go about it. You can go overseas someplace and marry them and then try to bring them in as your spouse, or you can get what's called a K-1 visa, which is also known as a fiancé visa, and that will allow you to bring them into the country for 90 days, and during that time you better get married or you're going to have a problem with the government. So it turns out that the K-1 visa is better than marrying someone. You would think that if you marry someone overseas, the government would say, well, they're married, we better get on this and let them in. Apparently it doesn't work that way. I don't know if they resent it, maybe they feel like they're being manipulated, or I don't know, maybe it's a common thing that scammers try to do. The K-1 visa is supposed to be faster. So in order to get the K-1 visa, you've got to show that you've been with the person physically at some point within the last 2 years, unless they're in an iron lung or something and they can't get out. Unless there's some hardship excuse. So we needed to see each other, and we wanted to see each other. So we started looking around for places to go, And because of coronavirus, things are really screwed up. There's only a few places where Americans can go without a big hassle. And for Zambians, forget it. I mean, nobody wants Zambians. you know, I don't know if they go to other countries and tear up hotel rooms or what, but people love American passport. Other countries love American passports. They love American money. So it's not that tough for Americans to go places. We can't go any place in Europe right now. I mean, well, a couple of places, but generally we're not welcome in Europe. But under ordinary circumstances, and even under coronavirus, we have a lot more options than most Africans have. Really made me appreciate. It's one of the many things that have happened during this year that have made me appreciate being an American even more than I appreciated in the past. So we had to find some place that would take me and would take her, and Egypt turned out to be the best choice we could come up with at the time. I could have flown to Zambia. It would have taken 35 hours, and then there's some kind of crazy quarantine. And she says they won't enforce it because hello Zambia, the laws don't mean that much. But I didn't want to get over there and go through all this stuff and maybe have them decide to enforce it just for me. And on top of that, as she pointed out, then I would just be in Zambia, which is not the most exciting place to visit. So 35-hour plane ride, expensive plane ride. You're in Zambia, which is a boring place, and you might get stuck in a hotel room. Egypt. So we decided to go to Egypt. And for me, I'll tell you, if you're an American getting a visa to go to Egypt, I'll tell you how you do it. You get off the plane and you say, I want a visa. And they go, okay, give us $25. And then a couple of minutes later, you have a visa. Or you can apply online and pay $25 and they give you a piece of paper. That was about it. I had to get a coronavirus test within 3 days of the departure of the flight that went to Egypt. Not the flight that went to the flight that went to Egypt. I flew from Orlando to New York and then New York to Egypt. And some people have had problems because they have counted it's not 3 days, it's 96 hours for Americans, it's 3 days for other people. Sometimes they count the 96 hours or the 72 hours, depending on where you are. They count it sometimes they'll count it from the departure of the last flight. So you can get over there and you can have your coronavirus test, and they'll say, well, this would have worked if you had flown directly from wherever the first place was. But since you stopped and flew from New York, some time passed, and you have to go home. So, but anyway, that's all it was. I mean, coronavirus test, which was a pain in the rear end, and paid them $25 online, and I got a certificate. And my fiance, I'll just spit it out. She's my fiance now. She had to get a yellow fever vaccine, and she had to go to the Egyptian embassy in Lusaka, Zambia, which is the capital. And it took her, I don't know, 2 weeks or something. At least they let her go. So I flew to New York, and then I flew from New York to Cairo, and she flew from Lusaka to Dubai, and then from Dubai to Cairo, and we met up. And it was just phenomenal. It was absolutely wonderful. Sometimes when you meet somebody that you've only seen on a computer, my friend who's encouraging me to meet people online, he said sometimes you walk into a restaurant and you see the woman, and you feel like asking her for gas money to get home because you feel like you've been cheated. Like in her picture, she's 28 years old and she weighs 105 pounds. And then in the restaurant, you see Heavy D with a wig. And you know that things are not going to work out. So here you are looking at dinner and the drive home and all this wasted time. And the person should have just been upfront with you. They shouldn't have put their high school photo on the internet. So that didn't happen. There was some awkwardness when we first met. I'll tell you what happened. If you go to Egypt, I'm just going to recommend that you do what we did. Pay the extra money and get guides. There's a company called EMO Tours, EMO Tours. I don't know why they named themselves that. It's a weird name. But if you get in touch with these people, they'll arrange things like day trips. They'll arrange cruises, things like that. They'll pick you up from the airport. They'll take you to your hotel. All sorts of things, and they do it very seamlessly and professionally. So EMO Tours, I recommend them. They pick us up at the airport. They dropped us off at the hotel. They took us on all sorts of tours. I recommend you use them. Because if you don't, first of all, you're going to find yourself driving in Egypt, which is like driving in hell. I mean, it's worse than Miami, which is saying a lot. You really don't want to be driving in Egypt. Maybe if you want to understand what I'm talking about, there's probably YouTube videos that show how they drive. It's bad. It's really bad. So you're going to end up driving yourself, and you're going to end up having a hard time figuring out where to go, and it's going to be a pain in the rear end. You don't want to do that. So they picked us up at the airport, and that's where I met her. I met her in the parking lot at the airport. Her flight arrived a little bit before mine. And I have been reading about Egypt. I wanted to make sure we didn't do anything stupid while we were there. And I had read that because it's a Muslim country, there's things you're not supposed to do. You're not supposed to kiss in public. You're not supposed to hug. Muslims don't like that. So we get to the parking lot, and I'm standing like 5 feet away from her. I'm like, "Hello, it's very good to meet you," And that's how she is with me, because we were afraid that our Egyptian guides would have fainting spells or something if we just latched onto each other. But we were both very happy to see each other, and we were eager to be together without Egyptian guides. And when we got to the hotel, things warmed up considerably. So it was just wonderful to meet this lady that I had been talking to for so long. We rented well, I guess it is rent. We rented a hotel room. Actually, I got two hotel rooms because I thought, well, we're Christians and we can't have sex, so why don't we just get two hotel rooms, and that way we'll be safe. So we got two adjoining hotel rooms, which is right away was maybe not the greatest idea. If you could open a door and look into your friend's, your partner, whatever you want to call her, your potential fiance, if you can look right into her room from your room, then pretty well wasted your money on the two bedrooms. But anyway, we did it, and as soon as we got there, we got a place. We went to a place called the Steigenberger Pyramids Hotel, and it's one of these hotels that's in Giza, which is the area where the pyramids are. It's a neighborhood of Cairo. It's like a lot of the hotels there. They have views where you can see the pyramids, and that's a big bonus. So we had these two rooms. You can look right out off the terrace and see the pyramids. And we got there, and we were considerably more affectionate than we had been in the parking lot and in the car. And things just got better and better after that. So we spent the first 2 days in Cairo, in Giza, and the day after we arrived, we took a tour of the pyramids. We went inside the Great Pyramids, which I don't recommend. She wanted a camel ride, which I don't want to ride anything that breathes. Motorcycles, sure. Camels, no. Horses, no. I have no use for a horse or a camel or a donkey or anything else that wants me to get on its back. I think that's kind of backward. They bounce around, and if you fall off, falling off a horse, that's a long fall, and a camel's like twice as high as a horse. But she wanted to do that, and I'll tell you, it's interesting. As it worked out, I paid for these camel rides, and then she didn't go. We got out of the Great Pyramid. We paid to go inside the Great Pyramid because you say, well, if you're at the Great Pyramid, obviously you want to go inside. You want to get the full money. So we went inside the Great Pyramid, and it was a very bad experience for her. The Great Pyramid is, I don't know, 3,500 years old or something, and at some point, some government that ruled Egypt, Muslims or somebody, not the ancient Egyptians, cut a hole into it so people could go in. And they did a really poor job with this. So the shaft that goes into the pyramid is a little over 3 feet high, and I guess it's about the same width. And it's maybe 50 yards all the way inside this thing, maybe a little shorter. It's also sloped. So on the way into this thing, you have to bend over and you have to go down this long slope. And then eventually you reach this little room, which is a little wider, not much, and you get to breathe for a second. And then you have to go up to the main chamber where the sarcophagus is, the big stone sarcophagus that used to have a mummy in it before somebody stole it. So it's a very unpleasant experience, especially for someone like me. I had this backpack with me, and I didn't want to leave it anywhere because there was an engagement ring in it. So I carried it with me. I had this heavy backpack. I was bending over, and they don't have steps. They have this long wooden platform with slats across it to keep you from sliding. So falling down is no problem, but if you do fall down, you won't slide. Anyway, I went all the way in, and I got to the sarcophagus room, and Rhoda was there, my now fiance, and there was this guide with us. Every time you go into a hole in Egypt, there's going to be some guy in there who wants to take pictures for you and show you around. It's not our official guide. Official guides are not allowed to go into the holes. But there's always some state employee or some guy who's got nothing better to do who's in this hole and he wants a tip. So I got in there, and this guy wanted to take pictures, and Rhoda loves having her picture taken. On the outside of the pyramid, she was all about having her picture taken. And once we got inside, she was saying, no, no, I think I'm going to leave, and she just ran out. And I was stuck with this guide for the next 5 minutes while he took pictures of me by myself sitting on the sarcophagus. And she got outside, and we went to the camel ride area, and I was asking her if she was all right, and she was saying, well, she didn't feel like she could breathe in there. So we get to the camel ride area, and instead of wanting to jump on the camel, she says, I want to go over here and sit in this tent that they've got set up so I can rest for a minute. And Arabs are very hospitable people. It's a big thing in Islam to be hospitable. So they invited her to sit down. They asked her if she wanted something to drink and all that. And I was just standing there thinking, we're supposed to ride the camels and get out of here. And it was really nasty out there. It was really hot that day, and the wind was blowing. It was extremely dry. And the camels relieve themselves all over the place, and it never rains, so that it's just there, you know. I guess maybe they sweep up the solid waste, but it still really stinks. And the camels themselves don't smell. They're not daisies either. They don't smell that hot. So I was standing there thinking, you know, she'll get up, and then we'll get on the camels and we can get out of here. And she would not get on the camel. She said, I'm going to walk back to the car. And I knew something was not right, but for some reason I was still supposed to get on the camel. So I ended up riding this camel, which is the farthest thing from what I wanted to do. So they put me on this camel, and this thing, first of all, when it stands up, it bends over this way and it bends over that way, and it's very hard to hold on. And second, when you're up there, you're literally, like, your rear end is literally like 8 feet in the air, and the camel rocks back and forth when it walks. And I was up there thinking, I'm holding on for dear life to the saddle horn, and I'm squeezing this thing with my legs, and I'm thinking, there are people who race these things. They got these things running 45 miles an hour, and some idiot is up there, and somehow he holds on and makes this thing go around turns and go on uneven terrain and all that. And this thing was barely moving on relatively flat ground, and it was all I could do to hang on. So we get back to the car, and she didn't want to ride the camel, so I gave everybody a tip. You have to tip everyone in Egypt. And we start going back to, we're on our way to the next event, the next thing, which is the pyramids of Saqqara, or pyramid. Maybe it's one pyramid. We didn't see it, so I don't know. And she starts saying she wants to. We have a cruise booked for like 2 days later. She said, "Oh, I want to get rid of. I don't want to take the cruise. We'll just stay here and sit in the hotel room." And I'm thinking, as much as I love this woman and how nice it would be to spend this time with her, I don't know if I want to spend 9 days in Egypt in one hotel room, or in our case, 2 hotel rooms. But she was saying she felt like she couldn't breathe inside the pyramid, and then when she got out, she felt like, even though she was out in the open air, she felt like she still couldn't breathe, and she thought the heat had something to do with it. And the guides were telling us it's going to be like 114 degrees in the area where the cruise is, down around Aswan and Luxor, even though the boat is air conditioned. But outdoors, it's going to be like 114, 115 degrees, and she's thinking, if I can't handle it here where it's 15, 20 degrees cooler, what am I going to do when I'm in Aswan and it's 115 degrees and I'm stuck there and there's no place to go? So we started talking about it, and we told them we didn't want to take the second half of the tour for that day, and we went back to the hotel. And I had experiences like this. What you have is like a panic attack, and I had one of these. I had an experience like that once in my life, and I knew that it was something. And I'm a Christian. She's a Christian. We believe in spirits and all that. I knew it had a supernatural cause. So I told her, don't panic. We'll go back to the hotel. We'll pray, and we'll cast this thing out. Some kind of spirit is in this hole where the mummies used to be buried. They worship these evil spirits and so on, and some of them are still there, and they didn't like you going down in that hole. So we'll go back to the hotel. So we got back to the hotel, and we prayed, and I cast it out, and she was fine. And after that, we were fine to go on the cruise. So I don't know why I'm telling you all this. I guess so you'll know. The religion of ancient Egypt is very evil, and it's best not to associate yourself with it. I guess it's okay to visit a temple or a pyramid, but be aware that those things. Egypt is not a Christian country, and evil spirits have a lot of power there. The evil spirits associated with Islam and the ancient Egyptian religion. So don't be stupid when you're over there, and you may undergo some kind of supernatural attack. So don't be afraid to cast things out, and for God's sake, don't buy souvenirs with pictures of heathen gods on them. Don't bring that stuff into your house, because spirits attach themselves to that kind of junk. Be content with your pictures and your videos. So that's what we did. The first day we did this tour, and the second day we went to Old Cairo, and we went to a bazaar. I don't recommend people go to bazaars. Apparently, there are two kinds of bazaars in Egypt. You know what a bazaar is? An outdoor market. It never rains, so you can just you can put merchandise on the street, and people walk down these little streets between the piles of merchandise, and they buy whatever they're persuaded to buy. Uh, Based on some things that our guides let slip, it's pretty obvious there are two kinds of bazaars. There's the ones the tourists go to, where everything's marked up 500%, and then there's the ones where the locals go when they want to get something. So they took us to the first kind, and my take on this is number one, don't go to the bazaars where tourists go, and number two, if you do go to a bazaar, even a regular bazaar, there's probably not going to be much of anything you want there. It's not like going to the Gap or Home Depot or your local grocery store. There's going to be a lot of souvenirs and junk and Chinese claptrap. So I'd recommend, maybe walk through a bazaar really quick just so you can say you've been there and take a couple of pictures, but then get out. I mean, don't buy anything there. And I know women will not listen to this advice because women have to buy junk. Um, but I'm just telling you, it's not a great experience going to a bazaar. No, Old Cairo and the Coptic stuff and the churches, that was kind of interesting. So the next day we got on a cruise. We had to get up at 4 a.m. because the guys were extremely cautious about missing flights. We got up at 4 a.m. I think it was to get a 7:30 flight from Cairo to Aswan, and then they let us on the boat at like 2 p.m. Actually, they gave us a special deal and let us on a little bit early. I think there was something we were supposed to do that morning, but she didn't feel up to it, so we just said forget it. So we got on the boat, and I'll tell you, I highly recommend Nile cruises. They're not that expensive, for $400 or $500 a person, and that's if you're paying full boat like we did. You can spend 4 nice days on a boat, and you get all your meals taken care of. You have a nice bathroom. You have a nice stateroom with twin beds. I mean, it's nice. It's a nice air conditioned modern environment with your own toilet and your own shower. Um, it's hard to beat. It really is. The people are really nice. The food is abundant. It's not fantastic food. Some of it's really, really good, but a lot of it's just okay. It's good quality food. It's not when I say it's just okay, I'm not talking about the quality. I mean, it's clean, it's fresh, the ingredients are top quality. I'm just saying it's a cafeteria, so you have to live with the fact that cafeterias aren't always the best places. They're not always where you're going to find the greatest chefs on earth. But they'll have all these tables, and they'll have dessert here and salad here and entrees over there and bread this way. You do have to pay extra for beverages, but it's not too much. It's not very expensive. And they have waiters that bring the water to you, and they're great. They're very helpful. We learned a few things about this though. If you decide to go on a cruise, you have to kind of put on your game face. You have to have a strategy, because as I told Rhoda, buffets bring out the worst in people, and she thinks that's hilarious. She keeps repeating that, but it's true. Buffets bring out the worst in people. And it's kind of like back in the 80s when everybody was using cocaine, and when someone would bring cocaine to a party, it would ruin the party, because the cocaine would bring out the worst in people. Everybody wanted to glom onto it and get it, And why is that? Well, it's because cocaine is served buffet style. You put it on a platter, and people come along and on a mirror, and people snort it up. So selfish people mob it, and everybody else is shut out. And buffets are the same way. So we found out how to handle this, and I'll just give you some advice. If you ever have to deal with a buffet, number one, get there as soon as the buffet opens, because if you're there 35 seconds later, the good stuff will be gone. So number one, be there as soon as it opens, and number two, get all your food at once. We found that you can't get the salad and eat it, and then get the entrees and eat them, and then get the desserts and eat them. It doesn't work that way, because if you do that, some obese German lady will come along and just scoop all the desserts onto her tray, and that's it. Your school's out. You're done. So you have to get everything at once. And first, get your desserts, because those are the high risk. Those are the things you really have the lowest chance of getting a shot at. And then after that, get your entrees and get your salad, and then order your beverage, and you're cool. So every time we went, that was the strategy we employed, and we did okay. We came out pretty well. And there were people that really abused the buffet. There was this American guy traveling alone, this strange guy that always wore black. And we would see him doing things like he'd go to the dessert area, and they would have grapes there. So he would put literally a pound of grapes on his plate, and there were 2 pounds for 60 people. So that's my strategy for the buffet. Anyway, the cruise was great. We had all these tours set up. and we would leave the boat and go on a tour and come back and bathe and get over it. Um, they took us to temples, various temples that are supposedly ancient. They're really most of the temples we went to were only about 2,000 years old, and they were not built by Egyptians, even though they're Egyptian-style temples and they celebrate Egyptian false gods. They were built by the Greeks. The Greeks ran Egypt, and the temples were wiped out by the time they got there. So the Greeks rebuilt them in order to make the Egyptians more cooperative and friendly. So it's a sad thing because there's a lot of Black Americans they have these delusions that are put into them by like these ghetto philosophers, ghetto scholars who will just believe anything and teach anything. And they say Egyptians were all black, which is not true. They were pretty white. DNA testing shows that modern Egyptians are around 20% black, and they're like 80% Caucasian generally. And this is a new thing. In the old days, they test out much more white. The black blood came fairly late in history. So the people who built the pyramids and the temples and all that, sorry to tell you, were dark-skinned white people. But anyway, there's a lot of black people in America that don't understand this, or they're just not willing to believe it. So they'll fly over and they'll say they're taught the crazy things. They're taught that Egyptians who were black founded civilization and had this incredibly advanced knowledge, and they had computers and they had nuclear reactors, and white people are hiding this knowledge and don't want them to have it. And I guess the Illuminati are involved or something. It's all nonsense. But they go to Egypt anyway, and they want to see these temples that they think black people built, and in reality they were built by pasty white Greeks. Cleopatra was white. She was a Greek. You can look it up. But anyway, the temples are kind of neat, and we went to see a bunch of them. And some of them were moved. The Egyptians put a dam up. The Nile floods regularly, or it used to. Every year it used to flood, and it was a problem. So they built a dam, and behind the dam now they have a man-made lake called Lake Nasser, named after a president of Egypt. And there used to be temple sites there, and they had to be moved to higher ground because if they hadn't done that, they'd be underwater all the time. And no tourist is going to pay to see a temple underwater. So a lot of these things, number one, were built by the Greeks, and number two, were moved by Americans and Europeans because Egyptians didn't have the technology. Anyway, we went to see a bunch of these things, and they're okay. There's one called Kamambu. There's one called Edfu. Maybe that's the same one. I don't think so. Anyway, there's temples in Luxor, which is at the north end. Luxor is Thebes. If you've ever heard of Thebes, it's the same thing. But everybody's politically correct now. You can't say Thebes. You have to say Luxor. They have temples in I don't know. There's a bunch of places. The only temples I would recommend missing are the temples at Abu Simbel. And I didn't know about this when I booked the trip. They just said, "Do you want to go here? Do you want to go there?" And I said, "Oh yeah, let's just go everywhere." So I paid for all this stuff, like $1,750 for two people, including the cruise and the airport rides and all that stuff. I wanted to make sure I had to do almost nothing on this trip because it was a very difficult thing to set up. So Abu Simbel, that was on our schedule, and we got to this boat and we took the first day's tour, and then we had to go to bed and get up the next day to go to Abu Simbel, and they said, "You got to be up at 4 a.m. Why? Well, because Abu Simbel, you have to drive 3 hours from the boat to get to Abu Simbel and 3 hours back, and in between there is absolutely nothing. I mean, there's a couple of buildings here and there, but other than that, it's just sand. And when I say sand, I mean sand. I don't mean sand with a plant here and there. No sand, dead, nothing. It's a sandbox. I mean, that's why our troops call Iraq a sandbox. It's like a sandbox, and it's not a pretty desert. It's a very I know I hate to say this because Egyptians might watch it, but it's a very ugly desert. It's just flat and featureless, except that sometimes some places it has rubble and rocks, and the rocks are ugly. They're not nice looking rocks. They look like construction debris, like there used to be something there, and Godzilla came in and just knocked it over with his tail. So the only stop we had was at some, half-hearted oasis where you could buy candy bars and coffee, and then we got right back in the car and off we went for another hour and a half of doing nothing. And the driver, typically we had a driver and a guide. The driver sat in front of me, and he kept his seat all the way back. We'd say, "Can you move your seat up?" And we get like this much, so it was bad. The temples are perfectly nice. There's nothing wrong with the temples at Abu Simbel. They're great, I guess, if you like temples. But they're worth maybe 40 minutes of your time, and then you have to get in the car, and you killed the whole day sitting in a tiny seat in a Hyundai Elantra. Is it Hyundai or Hyundai? I always forget because I don't have one. So I recommend just skipping Abu Simbel unless you're a real Egypt buff. Don't go to Abu Simbel. The other temples were okay because they were pretty close to the boat, and they all look pretty much the same. I'm sorry to tell you. Um, Interesting stuff. Our guide was an archaeologist. He was like a graduate student or something in archaeology, and he was a great guy, very cooperative, extremely helpful. All the guys were wonderful. They were solicitous. They were polite. They made accommodations for our spur of the moment decisions, and he told us all sorts of stuff. But the temples are all pretty much the same, and they don't really do a great job of managing the temples. In America, if you had a temple complex that brought in a lot of tourist money, you would make sure that refreshments were available and there would be a nice quality souvenir stand and so forth. And it would be close by. Maybe you wouldn't build it on top of the temple. That'd be kind of bad, but it would be close by. You wouldn't have to suffer. And in Egypt, it's not like that. They have, first of all, they have like a crummy little tourist bazaar and a really bad concession stand a long way from the stuff that you're looking at. So it's you have to in Egypt. There's always somebody trying to sell you something, and when you try to go into a tourist site, these guys are out there forming a gauntlet, trying to sell you bags and little plastic figures of the pharaohs and cheap jewelry. And these poor guys, they're very poor, and they're having the worst year of their lives because of coronavirus. Ordinarily, we had Egypt to ourselves. We would go into these sites, and there would be 30 or 40 people there, and ordinarily they would be crowded. They would be unpleasant to visit, more unpleasant than they were in 115-degree weather with 40 people. So these guys are starving to death, and it's really sad. And on top of that, they're just aggressive anyway because that's how the Middle East is. They like to sell stuff. So every time you go into one of these places, these guys will come up to you and they'll put stuff in your hands and they'll put stuff on your shoulder. Don't you want to buy this? It's only this much. It's only that much. And you have to argue with them and say, no, leave me alone. I don't speak English. Get away. It's really a pain in the butt. It's one of the bad things about Egypt is that there's always people want to haggle with you, and it's a bad system. If I could get the president of Egypt to listen to me, I would give him the following advice. I would say, tell them to knock it off. Tell them to put price tags on things. Look at America. Look at Europe. You can go to the Eiffel Tower, and at the base there's cafes, there's good food, there's tourist junk. There are price tags on it. You go up and you pay whatever they want, or you don't pay it, and you leave. And they're making a fortune. You go to the United States, there's souvenir stands and concession stands and restaurants all over tourist sites, and the people who run these things are they're making billions. They don't knock you down and sit on you and put a Mickey Mouse on your head and say it's only 15 Egyptian pounds when it's really worth 3. So my advice to the Egyptians is knock this stuff off. You're killing your own income. It's a really bad system because, well, for several reasons. For one thing, it conditions you to say no. I don't care what they're selling. If they were selling gold Rolexes for $3, and they came up to me and showed me one, I would say no, because I would just be so conditioned to saying no, get away from me, leave me alone. So sometimes they'll have something you actually want, like they'll have water and the price is reasonable, or a beverage or something, or maybe, who knows, they might come up to you with a bag that the lady who's with you might want, because women are, they like junk, and something you might actually want, and then you tell them to get lost, and then like 30 feet, 40 feet down the path, you start thinking, boy, I should have made an offer on that. But then it's too late. You don't want to go back and wade back into the fray. So they condition you not to buy anything. That's bad. I'm trying to think if there's anything else bad about it. There were some other points that I didn't like too much about it, but well, I don't know. It discourages people from visiting the sites. It's like, imagine if every time you went to McDonald's you were attacked by horseflies. Eventually you'd not want to do that. We went to the Valley of the Kings when we got up toward Luxor. Luxor, it's not Luxor, it's Luxor. They pronounce it Luxor. The Valley of the Kings was interesting because they had some of the few things that were actually built by Egyptians. They had the tombs of the pharaohs that are not spectacular tombs. They're underground holes. They're basically holes. Apparently what they did was they carved these things out of the rock, and then they put rock on top of them. So you look at these things and think, how did they get all their junk in here? They got these tiny little openings and these big cavities in there where the stuff was. How did they get the stuff in there through these tiny little shafts? And it turns out that these things were open at first. When the Egyptians carved them, they had open roofs, and then they piled rocks and stuff on top of them to disguise them. So anyway, we went and we saw the Tomb of Ramsey. I don't know, this Ramses, that Ramses, and we saw King Tut's tomb. They advised us not to see King Tut's tomb. They said it's small, it's expensive, there's not much going on in there. But we thought, how often do you go to Egypt? So we went and looked at King Tut's tomb. They were absolutely right. They had a fake mummy in there. I don't know how they do that, but they had a fake mummy in there who was I guess supposed to look like him. And then basically you go down this hallway and you make a right and you find yourself in this little room which is about the size of my dining room that I'm in right now. And it's got some nice stuff on the walls and there's an empty sarcophagus and it looks kind of nice, but it's not it's not the thrill of a lifetime. We saw the actual treasures of King Tut in Egypt on our second day at the Egypt Museum, and they had all that stuff there. The stuff they used to have touring around the United States on airplanes. It's in the Egypt Museum, and there's nothing in the hole now. And apparently, when King Tut died, he was young, and they didn't expect him to kick off, so they didn't have anything really fancy built for him, and he ended up with this tiny little tomb. Some of the other tombs were bigger. We had some problems with the people. Again, guides are not allowed to go into these things. They want to minimize the number of people that go in because your breath can cause problems. It can condense on the stone and bacteria grow. Like in King Tut's tomb, there's all these spots on the walls because people have gone in and their breath is condensed and bacteria has grown, which is an amazing thing. It's amazing that it could happen in the desert in 5% humidity, but somehow it has happened. I mean, to me it seems like a curse because these people were heathens and they worship devils, but I don't know. So they don't want a lot of people going in. Your guide can't go in with you, but on the other hand, there are these state employees, these low-level attendants who basically live in these tombs, I guess 8 or 9 hours a day. And they are annoying because they will accost you and they'll start taking pictures for you, and then when it's over, they'll expect a tip, and they'll expect a tip that's way too big, and they won't quote you a price before they take all the pictures. And on top of that, Egyptians don't take very good care of their antiquities. You can go through the Egyptian museum and put your hands all over things and rub the finish off. Nobody cares. There's no barrier between you and I mean, you can't touch King Tut stuff because it's expensive. But if it's a stone carving or whatever, you can rub your hands all over it, and they couldn't care less. And it's like that in the Valley of the Kings. A lot of the stuff, you can reach out and touch it. And there are things where you're not supposed to go in, but there's no way to prevent you from going in because the only people who are there to prevent you are the attendants, and they treat this stuff like a campsite. One of these guys, there's a sarcophagus there and it had a hole in the side, and this guy took my phone and went into the sarcophagus. There's sand on the bottom of it where he's gone in and out, and he's left sand there, and typically these things have carvings on the bottom, and you don't want to screw that up. And he's walking around like, scraping his feet on the sand and presumably rubbing out the carvings. So he took pictures inside this thing, and then he begged me and Rhoda to go in there after him. And I'm thinking, first of all, that's a crummy thing to do to your heritage. And second, I don't really want to spend the night in an Egyptian prison. So we refused, and he was really upset. We got out, and we were telling our guide about this, not to rat on this guy, but because, we had a good relationship with the guide. We were just talking about how there's funny things about Egypt that are interesting to talk about. And I was saying, boy, these guys, in there, they really need to just say, this is what I want up front, or just leave people alone. And the guy got really upset, and he went to the manager of the Valley of the Kings, and we had to talk to this guy, and we're telling him, look, we don't have a problem with this. It's just we found it amusing, and we don't want to get these people in trouble because they're starving to death. And he was not having any of it. He went and dug people out of the tombs, and we had to identify the people we talked to, and they got yelled at, and they were really frightened. So I felt awful about that. But evidently they kind of have it coming because our guide told us that at some point in the past, one of these characters, or a couple of these characters, took a bribe from an English tourist, and they went in at night and they cut a panel out of the side of a tomb, and this English guy tried to take it on an airplane to England. And in my mind, I'm picturing a gay guy who wants a really neat cheese board for his guests. But anyway, he got in serious trouble for that, and the people who made it possible were Egyptians. So I don't know. That's how that is. The Valley of the Kings, one of the nice things about it is they have a nice little outdoor concession stand, which is pretty close to everything. You can sit down and be comfortable. I don't know why they don't do that everywhere else. From there, we went to the temple, or maybe it's a tomb. I can't remember. Temple, whatever. I guess it's a temple because it's too big to be a tomb. The temple of Hatshepsut, and that was a woman who was a pharaoh, and she ruled as a man. I can't quite figure that out. She had a stepson, and he was supposed to be the pharaoh, but she put the kibosh on that, and she wore a false beard and pretended. I wouldn't say pretended to be a man, but somehow she was not considered the queen of Egypt. She was considered the king, even though she was a lady. And she built this gigantic thing to honor herself, and it's actually Egyptian. The Egyptians built it. There's a lot of new construction on it that was done in the 20th century, which supposedly screwed it up. But anyway, it's a genuine Egyptian site, and there was not much there, in terms of refreshments or amenities. So we got to take a look at that and take some pictures, and that was all right. And then I guess the day after that, I think that was the last place. The last place we went was the temples, Luxor, and there, by this time you've seen a bunch of Greek temples pretending to be Egyptian, and they all look basically alike because they all had the same architect, and he used exactly the same design. So I guess it was nice to be there and take some pictures, but it was not the experience of a lifetime. So we did that, and then we got back on the boat, and the next day we went back to Giza, and we spent 2 luxurious days in our old hotel rooms, or at least identical hotel rooms, a couple floors lower, and just enjoyed doing nothing. During this time, at some point, I proposed. I proposed on the cruise, and I have to tell you, our relationship. On the one hand, we're both very, very romantic people. Christians are romantic people. People don't understand that, but you have to. Romantics are idealists. They believe in heaven, and they believe that good defeats evil, and they're not cynical. So Christians are very romantic people, and you would think it would be natural for us to have this incredibly romantic proposal, but you can't do that in Egypt because there's no place to go. There are no nice outdoor locations that are comfortable and picturesque where you can have a picture taken proposing to somebody. It's not like that. You're all the time you're thinking, boy, I want some water. I would really love to be in the shade right now. I wish this wind wasn't blowing. You can forget wearing a jacket because it'll get ruined. I took a jacket and it stayed in my suitcase the whole time. There's no nice restaurants. You can't go to a place like Ruth's Chris and order a $75 steak and a bottle of champagne and propose. You can't do that. The restaurants are really, casual is the nicest word I can think of for it. I'll just put it that way. They're extremely casual. I don't think I saw a single restaurant with air conditioning the whole time I was there, except for the boat. So the whole time I'm thinking, I don't want to just pull out this ring and say, marry me. That's pretty tacky. But on the other hand, there's not much else I could do. And we're pretty much upfront about this anyway, because very early on in our relationship, we knew we wanted to get married. We fell in love very quickly, and each of us recognized we had something good. So we've been very open about this stuff, and I've talked to her about, what kind of ring she likes and so forth. And I didn't bring a nice ring to Egypt because she told me she didn't want me to bring a nice ring. During my mother's lifetime, she had 3 wedding rings. First, she had a band, which she lost, and then my dad bought her a heavy gold ring and a heavy gold watch that were kind of like the kind of thing people would think were stylish in the 1960s. And that's not intended to be flattering. So they're kind of dated, and the stones were very small. But technically it's a wedding ring. And after that, at some point, my dad finally decided to get my mother a nice classic wedding ring and a wedding band and an engagement ring. A set, whatever it's called. I'm not a woman. I don't know what it's called. Who cares? If I were gay or a woman, I could tell you. So at some point, he bought her something nice. And when my mother died, my sister took the nice set because my sister's a narcissist, and obviously when a woman dies, her son gets her wedding ring. Hello, because what's a woman going to do with a wedding ring? Is she going to propose to herself? No, you give that to the son, and he gives it to whoever he proposes to. But my sister snatched it, and I got the cheap one, I shouldn't say cheap, but the cheaper one and the watch. So this is what I had on hand. And Rhoda had told me she didn't want me to give her a good ring because she didn't want her relatives in Zambia to know that she was getting engaged. They're into witchcraft and all kinds of things, and for some reason they get off on cursing her, and she just didn't want to deal with it. Her basic strategy is to leave Zambia as soon as she gets the visa and just take off and go to America. And they'll find out later that she's over here. So I brought this ring that I had. I figured this will hold us until we get the nice ring. So one night while we're sitting, first of all, a day or two after we got there, she just flat out asked me, when are you going to propose? which kind of killed the romance. And I was telling her, I was hoping for some kind of romantic moment, but I can see that's not going to happen. And I'll do it. I'll do it. So a couple of days later, finally, one day after dinner, I just opened the box that the ring was in, and I told her how I felt about her, and that I loved her, and I wanted her to be with me the rest of my life, and did what I could, and slapped the ring on her, and that was it. That was our big romantic proposal. And there's no pictures, confetti didn't come down from the ceiling. We didn't have mimes and dancing bears. It was just that was it. It wasn't cute. It wasn't clever, but it was sincere and it's done. So now she's over in Zambia with a pretty bad ring that she doesn't have to show to anybody. And if it gets stolen, it's not that big a deal. And I'm going to get something nice now in America. So now we're engaged, and I don't know. That's the story. That's the story of our trip to Egypt. What would I tell other people about Egypt? I would say the people. First of all, I love the people. I'm not crazy about the country, but I love the people. And I was very happy to find out that they are genuinely nice, warm-hearted, kind people. And it wasn't just the people who were taking our money. It was just random people on the street. They were helpful. They were kind. They always had a big smile. So they were just great, and I was really happy about that because I've had some negative feelings in my heart toward Muslims. I'll just be honest with you. I've struggled with that because 911 and I'll just be truthful. There are areas of the world where Muslims are not the nicest people on earth, where they are not so kind, not so hospitable. If you read colonial literature, you can read about their unbelievable cruelty to each other and also to Europeans who had shown up. And then there are places like Afghanistan where virtually every man is a pedophile. And it's one of the problems that our American military has had in Afghanistan because they have to work with men who are pedophiles, and they're raping little boys over and over and over while these American soldiers are there cooperating and working with them. And you can't do anything with them. You can't turn them in and get them in trouble because it's accepted in Afghanistan. So, there are some problems in some Muslim areas. There are some Muslims who aren't the nicest people on earth, and Muslims have a tendency to murder Christians on a grand scale. You go to persecution.org and read about it. Christians have, forever have been persecuted and murdered by Christians. It happens in Indonesia. It's even happened in Egypt. So I've had some negative feelings about Muslim people, and it was really nice to meet nice, warm-hearted Muslims who don't hate Americans. I was so happy about that, and we prayed for him all the time. We prayed for one of our guys that God would help him quit smoking, and he texted me the other day and said he'd quit. So really happy about that. The people are really, really nice. On the other hand, the country needs some work, and I'll just tell you, this is my tough love for Egypt. I'm not saying this to be nasty. Egypt is unbelievably dirty. It's really dirty. It seems like no matter where you are, if you're outdoors, you can smell poop. And sometimes it's dog poop, and sometimes it's camel poop, and sometimes it's human beings poop, and sometimes there's also rotten garbage. That's just the way it is. I don't know why they have stray dogs all over the place, and they poop, and the camels poop, and I guess somehow or another people poop ends up out on the street. So get used to that. It's going to stink, and there's going to be dust everywhere, and they throw garbage on the ground. I saw a guy open his car door just so he could throw garbage on the ground in front of me. I saw a garbage dumpster there, and instead of putting stuff in the dumpster, people had thrown rotten garbage all around the dumpster. The idea was, as long as you're in the neighborhood of the dumpster, that's an acceptable place to put your trash. I saw construction rubble everywhere. In Egypt, when they knock down a wall or something and have a bunch of bricks or a pile of rocks or something that they need to get rid of, they just leave it there. I saw stuff that had been lying on the ground, looked like it had been there for 20 years, and people were just walking around it. In America, you put that stuff on a truck and you take it to the landfill. So that was odd. So you'll also see a lot of dead flies in the restaurants, and the food seems clean, but the restaurants themselves not so much. On the boat, everything seems spotless. I mean, I had no complaints whatsoever about the cafeteria there, and I assume that they're all like that because apparently these boats are like carbon copies of each other. There's a bunch of them, and they're all the same. What else can I tell you about Egypt? As I said about the traffic, don't even try to drive. Get that idea out of your head. You're not going to be able to do it. I mean, you can, but you're gonna regret it. It's really unpleasant. They drive 6 inches away from each other and honk the horn constantly. The lanes mean absolutely nothing, and the roads are terrible. So don't do it. Get Ubers. That's the way to go. It's cheap. Just do it. You can't. There's some places where you can't walk. In Giza, you can't walk because for some reason the sidewalks are not continuous. You'll walk like 50 yards on a sidewalk, trying to stay away from the cars, and then you'll reach a point where the sidewalk ends and there's just street, and then you're walking in among the cars. Yeah, it's not good. It's not a good situation. And the sidewalks are like a foot high off the street, so you'll be walking along and then you just plummet down onto the street, and you're just alone with these crazy drivers, and it's bad. It's really bad. The other thing is there's in Giza at least shopping is not you're not going to be able to shop in Egypt. It's not like America where you can like New York. You're walking down the street in New York and say, oh, I want to pull in here. I want to turn in here and get pizza. I want to turn in here and get Kleenex, a bottle of water, a candy bar, whatever it is. You can't do that in Egypt, or at least in Giza. Um, it's just too hard to walk to the shops. It's impossible, and the restaurants are horrible. So that's just the truth in Giza. When we decided to stay in the hotel and do nothing for 2 days, we said we're just going to eat room service, and that worked out fine for us. In the city, the sidewalks are continuous, and you can actually walk on them, and the situation appears to be considerably better, but it's still pretty dirty. So I guess those are the downsides of Egypt. That and the weather, which is unbelievably hot. We went in the summer because we had no choice, but if you go, wait till October at the very earliest. You don't want to be standing around in the blazing sun with no clouds and a strong dry wind, which feels like a blow dryer. You don't want to be doing that when it's 115 degrees out and 5% humidity. I wonder if there's anything else. Everybody wants a tip in Egypt. Everybody wants a tip. Doesn't matter. Every time you go to the toilet, you got to give them £5. And if they know you're a tourist, they may try to. £5 is like 30 cents. And if they know you're a tourist, they may try to squeeze $3 or $4 out of you. So get used to that. I mean, every time someone touches your luggage, whatever it is, you got to give them some money. And the ATMs over there give 200-pound notes. So 200 pounds is like $12, which is a fortune in Egypt. A typical tip, like if someone carries your luggage, 50 pounds is about right. That's generous. If somebody drives you around all day and they've already been paid for the driving, 100 pounds, that's perfect. That's generous. So you don't want to be walking around with 200 pounds everywhere you go. They'll make change for you and they won't give you a hard time about it, but it's awkward. It's awkward to say, here's 200 pounds, give me 195 back because I peed. So go to your hotel when you get your money and make them give you small bills. And at my hotel, they weren't really set up to do that. The hotel was basically very nice, but little things that would be obvious in Europe or America, they didn't understand. I had a hard time getting change there. And if you need something like some kind of pharmacy item, like if a lady needs something because her cycle is at a certain point, or if you lost your toothbrush or you don't have your comb, forget it. They're not going to help you with that. What they will do is contact a pharmacy for you, and somebody will come over and deliver whatever it is you want. And you have to make sure you know what you want and that you communicate it clearly. So that was kind of a bummer. I'm trying to think if there's anything else you need to know. I don't really recommend going inside the Great Pyramid. I don't recommend sitting on a camel. I think it's a big waste of time. You can go on a hot air balloon if you want. Having seen the way the Egyptians maintain things and so forth, their attitude toward rules, I really was not comfortable with being in a hot air balloon maintained by Egyptians. I mean, I guess they go up every day and come down alive, but still, it made me a little nervous. So I'm sorry if you're Egyptian, you're watching this. I really don't want to hurt your feelings. It's just you got an interesting way of life over there. It's a little different in America. I mean, Americans aren't as responsible as the Germans or the Japanese, but we're on another level from Egypt. So that was how I felt. What else can I tell you? The food. The quality of the food, even though it may not always taste that great, the quality is very good, and their vegetables are excellent. Unlike Americans, Americans pick vegetables and fruit when they're not ripe, and Egyptians don't do that. They pick stuff that's ripe, so you get really good tomatoes, really good cucumbers. So when you go to the salad bar on your boat or whatever, you'll get good stuff. You'll like that a lot. So you can eat a really healthy diet over there. If you go to a hotel where they have breakfast included, and then you're on the boat and all the meals are included, you can stuff yourself with all sorts of vegetables and dairy products and stuff that keeps your digestion going, so you don't suffer tourism constipation. The water seems okay. I brushed my teeth with it. I didn't drink it, but I have a feeling I could have. But I did brush my teeth with it, and it got in my mouth while I was in the shower, and I didn't die of diarrhea or anything like that. As for safety, I was not afraid of street crime. It didn't seem like a problem in Egypt. Now, terrorism is another story. Apparently, they've had a lot of problems in Egypt with terrorism over the last 12 years. Um, and they're paranoid about the tourist sites, and they're paranoid about hotels. So you're going to encounter bomb sniffing dogs, and there's going to be a lot of checkpoints, and there's places where they have barricades set up that are staggered, so that if someone tries to ram them with a car full of explosives, they have to go around these things, and it takes them so long. The troops have plenty of time to get their machine guns ready and blow them off the road. Our hotel had a sliding steel gate, and it was always open a little bit so you could walk in, but if you went in a car, you would have to stop outside the gate, and they would have a bomb dog walk around, and then you go in. So terrorism is a concern. It didn't happen while we were there, but if it does happen, it'll probably be pretty bad. I wasn't afraid to have my wallet with me, although I did keep it in my front pocket. And the people struck me as honest. People who didn't have to do things for us did things for us. People who didn't have to refund money to us did refund it. We didn't catch anybody in any lies, except of course the people who are trying to sell us garbage at the tourist sites. That's haggling. You're supposed to lie. So I don't think you should be afraid to take your phone. Somebody said, "Oh, your phones are going to be stolen." Nothing like that happened. We didn't even see a hint of that kind of thing. They say pickpockets are a problem, but it's not that hard to resist pickpockets. So I guess what would I tell you? I'd say if you want to go to Egypt, by all means, go ahead. Get a tour guide. Go to Emo Tours and hire them. They're great. They'll take care of everything. Your feet will hardly ever touch the ground. Go when the weather's good. Carry small bills. Um, don't ride the camel. Stay out of the Great Pyramid. Expect the people to be really nice. I really hope for the best for Egypt. Rhoda and I prayed for Egypt over and over while we were there. I really like to see them do well. The Bible says, there are problems between Muslims and Jews and Muslims and Christians, but the Bible says that the Egyptians are God's people. The book of Isaiah refers to the Egyptians as God's people. It says the Jews are God's inheritance, the Assyrians are the work of his hands, and the Egyptians are his people. And at some future point, they're supposed to get along. So God loves the Egyptians, and he hasn't abandoned them. So I felt good about praying for them. I suppose you should too. It's not a good thing to be against Israel. It doesn't exactly bring God's favor down on you. So any help they can have to have their eyes open is a good thing. I don't know when we're going to get married. I mean, our attitude toward that is we're going to try to work it out so she can get to America and we can do it here. And if it turns out that won't work out, we're thinking we'll just go to some place like Mexico where they will allow her in, and we'll just get married there. And maybe what we'll do is we'll get married. In Mexico, you have to have a civil ceremony. The religious ceremony doesn't really mean anything to them. So you can have both, but the civil one is the one that counts. So we're kind of thinking maybe we'll go there and get a civil marriage. And the neat thing about Mexico is they don't report it to the United States. If you get married in Mexico and you come to the United States, you're not automatically married here. So there's no reason why we even have to tell our State Department about that. They could just sit on it, as far as I'm concerned, because they're contrary and backward. So for purposes of being man and wife and enjoying the privileges thereof, our consciences would be relieved regarding marriage. Yet we would not necessarily have any obstacles to Rhoda's immigration coming from marriage, because our State Department would not recognize it. So that's something we've actually thought about. And again, I guess it doesn't sound romantic, but both of us, our attitude is like, put us in front of a county clerk or somebody. No guests, no gown, just get it done. Nice ring, get it over with. And later on we can celebrate. But this coronavirus mess, it just made things too hard. It's made things too difficult. So there's no point in trying to have a Cinderella wedding. Did Cinderella have a fancy wedding? I don't know if she did have a wedding. I guess the story was over when she found the shoe or whatever. But anyway, you know what I'm saying. A fairy tale wedding. I'll tell you something you need to know if you're young and stupid. Engagements are not important. And weddings are not important. These are trivial things. The size of your ring is not important. It's trivial. Whether you have a ring is not important. What's important is marriage. Marriage is important. Okay, and a lot of women in the United States are obsessed with fancy weddings, and it's amazing what they do to their friends. Like a woman will have 10 sorority sisters, and all of them will want the other ones to go to their expensive wedding and spend $5,000. So by the time you get married, by the time all of them get married off, each of them has spent what $45,000 on this ridiculous narcissistic ceremony. That's after which marriage is going to be a letdown. I mean, if you're choosing your husband based on the size of the ring and how good he looks in the tuxedo and how big a wedding he can afford, it's weird. It's weird these days. Men pay for marriages, which is wrong. The bride's supposed to pay for that, the bride's family. But anyway, Americans have no class, so we do that. If that's the kind of guy you're marrying, and that's your priority, and you want to have the best day of your life, and you want to be the most special little princess on earth for one day, you're going to get divorced. You're going to be divorced in like 1 to 3 years because your priorities are garbage. Okay, it's much better to be married in a Mexican, by a Mexican justice of the peace or whatever they're called, with the minimal witnesses required by law. It's much better to do that and tell nobody about it and wear, cargo shorts and have a great marriage than it is to have the best ring and have everybody fly to Thailand or I don't know, Tahiti or something. It's much better to have the cheap, unassuming wedding and have a great marriage than it is to have a Disney marriage and then find your husband on top of your nanny 2 years later. So shallow people have bad marriages. You need to have God arrange your marriage. I'm just telling you. So that's our attitude. I mean, we just don't care. We just don't care. We just want to get it over with. And once it's solid and once she's here, then we'll try to make everything nice. The main thing is we get to be together, and that's going to be phenomenal. So that's what happened in my life. I've been to Egypt. That's why I didn't put any videos up. And I don't know if I'll put any more videos up in the future or not. I'm kind of discouraged about it because I feel like America's going down the toilet. And I put these things up, and I don't think they really reach anybody. I talk about God, and I don't think anybody cares. Homosexuality has taken over. Paganism has taken over. Worship of the government has taken over. We elected this ninny, this guy that everyone made fun of. And every election before the last election, people laughed at Joe Biden, and they ridiculed him, even the liberal press. And now suddenly he's Saint Joe, and he can do no wrong, even though he barely knows where he is. So, and we worship the government now because we want to have homosexuality and government checks. So I don't know. I kind of feel like I have to wonder if my time on Earth is coming to a close sooner than later. Maybe the rapture is closer than we all think. So is there any point in putting videos up when no one cares? I don't know. But there's a couple of people that have acknowledged the videos, and so for them, I'll put this up. I hope all of you have a wonderful week. If I come back, great. If I don't, pray for me, and I will do the same for you. That's all I got. I hope you do well.